The void of space stretched infinitely, its darkness interrupted only by the cold glow of distant stars. Among them, an ominous shape emerged from the abyss, the black ship. It moved without haste, a silent predator gliding through the vast emptiness. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, a void within the void, featureless and without insignia. To those who knew of its legend, it needed no markings. Its presence alone was enough to send ripples of unease through the Dominion fleet stationed at the edge of the system. Aboard the command bridge of the Dominion warship, Admiral stood rigid, his sharp reptilian gaze fixed on the main. The black ship was growing larger by the second, its approach slow and deliberate, like the measured footsteps of an executioner. Around him, his officers whispered among themselves, their voices hushed but laced with fear. The ship was infamous. No one knew its origins, only that it appeared when debts had been broken, when oaths had been shattered. And now it had come for them. Admiral, one of his officers, a young strategist with trembling claws, turned from her console. They're not broadcasting any identification signals. No hails, no challenges. They're just approaching. Narrowed his eyes. Of course, they weren't broadcasting. The black ship never announced itself with words. Its presence was the message. The Admiral's tail flicked once against the steel floor, his agitation barely contained. Status report, he ordered. All ships in the fleet, defensive positions. If they make a hostile move, we respond in kind. The bridge crew scrambled to obey, but there was hesitation in their movements. Everyone knew the stories. The black ship didn't need an armada. It was an armada unto itself. The vast array of weapons came to life, targeting systems locking onto the dark vessel, but no shots were fired. Not yet. Exhaled slowly, his mind racing. It had been years since the Dominion had last dealt with the black ship. The contract had been clear, mutual assistance in war, in commerce, in intelligence. The Dominion had needed allies, and the black ship had extended its hand. But then the war had shifted. New threats emerged, forcing the Dominion to abandon old pacts in favor of survival. No, corrected himself. Not abandon. Betray. And now, retribution had come. The comms officer flinched as her console flickered. Admiral, we're receiving a signal. It's not a stand-and hail. It's a direct transmission. No encryption, no security clearance. Just this. She hesitated, then patched the signal through to the main screen. The darkened, and then, in its place, a face materialized. Human. Stern. Unyielding. Captain Elias Mercer. His cybernetic enhancements gleamed dully in the dim light of his command chamber, his cold blue eyes locking onto, with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. He didn't speak at first, letting the weight of his presence settle over the Dominion bridge like a shroud. Then, finally, he leaned forward. Admiral, he said, voice smooth yet edged with steel. Did you think we wouldn't notice? The Dominion officer stiffened, eyes darting toward their leader. Forced himself to meet Mercer's gaze. Captain Mercer, he replied, his voice even. Your presence is unexpected. Is it? Mercer tilted his head slightly. That's funny. You should have been expecting us the moment you broke our agreement. The tension in the room thickened. The black ship had never been known for second chances. Jaw tightened. Circumstances changed, he said carefully. The war, spare me, Mercer cut him off. We don't deal in excuses. We deal in contracts. And you broke yours. The human's voice carried no anger, only certainty, and that was somehow worse. Could have countered rage with rage, could have matched threats with threats. But this was cold inevitability. You don't understand. Tried again, stepping forward. We were forced into. No, Mercer interrupted again. You made a choice. And now, you live with it. Silence fell over the bridge. The Dominion officers looked to their admiral, waiting for an answer, for a command, for anything. But said nothing. He knew what Mercer's words meant. There would be no negotiation, no plea for reconsideration. The black ship had come, and it would not leave. Then, for the first time, Mercer's expression shifted. Not quite a smirk, but close. "We'll be in touch," he said, and the transmission cut. The cleared, revealing the black ship once more. But now, it was different. The silence before the storm had passed. Now came the reckoning. An admiral knew with an unshakable certainty that the Dominion was about to pay the price. Aboard the tension hung like a physical weight. The black ship lingered on the main, and moving, yet its mere presence sent ripples of fear through the Dominion crew. Admiral stood rigid, his mind racing through possible responses. Running wasn't an option, their fleet was strong, but the black ship was something else. Engaging it in battle was equally reckless. Had heard the stories, the warnings, the whispered fears that even Dominion warlords dared not say aloud. The black ship did not engage in battle. It executed. "Ordnance, Admiral," one of his officers asked, her voice betraying the fear gripping the crew. The rest of the bridge crew looked at him, their eyes filled with desperate hope that he had an answer. Exhaled sharply, pushing aside the gnawing sense of doom. "Hold position," he commanded. "Do not fire unless fired upon." But even as he said it, he knew that was a hollow reassurance. If Mercer had come to collect, there would be no need for a battle. The decision had already been made. A sharp ping echoed through the bridge. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not Captain Mercer this time." Narrowed his eyes. "Put it through." The screen flickered again, but this time, the image was different. A vast, shadowed command room appeared, illuminated only by the eerie glow of tactical displays. A figure stood at its center, a woman, her presence as unsettling as Mercer's but in an entirely different way. Her sharp features, cybernetic augmentations, an unsettlingly calm expression marked her as one of the black ship's strategists. The Dominion had dealt with Mercer before, but this woman had only heard of her in rumors. "Executor Sable, Admiral," she said, her voice smooth and clinical, as if she were discussing a routine business transaction rather than the looming consequences of a broken contract. "Captain Mercer has made our position clear. Now, I am here to discuss execution of terms." Felt his claws dig into his palms. "We are willing to negotiate," he began, but Sable merely raised a hand. "No. You misunderstand. The time for negotiation has long passed. What remains now is how the debt is to be paid." The words sent a chill down spine. The black ship did not deal in diplomacy. It dealt in balance. And when a deal was broken, the cost was always extracted. "What are your demands?" he forced himself to ask. Sable tilted her head slightly, as if considering the weight of his question. "You defaulted on an agreement that ensured mutual prosperity," she said. "The black ship invested in your survival. In return, you abandoned our arrangement when it was no longer convenient for you. This is not a matter of betrayal, Admiral. This is a matter of business." Her cold gaze flickered slightly as she glanced at something beyond the "and we always collect what is owed." Clenched his fists. "If this is about resources, we can." "It is not," Sable interrupted. "Your fleet, your assets, your trade networks, none of it matters now. This is about setting an example." The bridge crew stiffened. There it was. The black ship didn't want wealth. It didn't want a tribute of ships or weapons. It wanted retribution. "Then what will it be?" asked, his voice quieter now. He already knew the answer before Sable spoke. "Your fleet will not leave this system intact," she said simply. "Some of your ships will burn. Some will be allowed to flee, to tell the story of what happens when the black ship is betrayed. And you, Admiral, you will not leave at all." The words were spoken without malice, without anger. Just a fact. A sentence handed down without the illusion of appeal. Tail lashed Vance, his mind spinning. "And if we resist?" he challenged, though the words felt hollow. Sable exhaled, a slow, deliberate sound, almost like disappointment. "Then it will be far worse." Turned to his officers. Their faces were grim, their fear barely contained. The Dominion was powerful, yes, but the Black Ship operated by different rules. It was not bound by treaties, alliances, or conventional warfare. It struck with precision, with purpose. It was not an enemy to be outmaneuvered, it was an inevitability. Looked back at the screen, meeting Sable's and blinking gaze. I assume I have a choice in how this plays out, he said, keeping his voice even. Sable nodded once. A choice, yes. A good commander knows when to fight and when to accept fate. You are a soldier of the Dominion, but at this moment, you are something more. You are a lesson. The transmission ended without further discussion. The Black Ship remained unmoving, a silent spectre waiting for decision. The Admiral turned toward his crew. There was no point in pretending anymore. All personnel are to evacuate to secondary vessels, he ordered. Get them out of this system. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one questioned him. They knew, just as he did, that this was already over. The warships of the Dominion fleet began to shift, their engines burning as they made preparations for departure. But not all of them. Some remained, locked into position, fully aware that they would never leave. Exhaled as he watched the Black Ship through the. He had made many decisions in his career, but this was the one that would define him. On the deck of the Black Ship, Captain Mercer watched the unfolding scene with unreadable eyes. Prepare the strike teams, he ordered. We begin in 5 minutes. His officers moved without hesitation. No victory cries, no bloodthirsty anticipation. This was not war. This was business. And the Black Ship never left a dead impede. The Black Ship moved with eerie silence through the wreckage of the Dominion fleet, its dark hull cutting through the battlefield like a spectre of inevitability. Fires still raged among the drifting wrecks, the remnants of Admiral forces reduced to little more than debris and fading distress signals. Among the few surviving ships, when Dominion cruiser remained operational, its engines flickering as it struggled to hold position. Inside, Captain stood at the bridge, his scaled hands gripping the rail tightly as he watched the aftermath unfold. The battle had been over in minutes, not hours. The Dominion's finest had been given no quarter, no path to victory, only a choice between destruction and surrender. And now, even those who survived were left to wonder if they had truly been spared. A sharp beep from the comm console drew attention. Incoming transmission, his officer reported. It's from the Black Ship. The bridge crew tensed, took a slow breath and gave a nod. Patch it through. The screen flickered to life, revealing the cold, unreadable face of Executor Sable. Behind her, the command deck of the Black Ship was bathed in dim light, its displays running silent calculations, each one spelling the fate of those who remained. Captain, Sable began, her voice as calm as ever, as if she were dictating a routine business update rather than issuing the terms of their survival. Your ship remains intact. This was not an accident. Tail flicked in agitation, but he kept his expression neutral. Then I assume we are being given an offer. Sable nodded once. Correct. The Black Ship does not annihilate without purpose. Your fleet was a liability. You, however, are an asset. Narrowed his eyes. If this is about forcing our surrender, it is not, Sable interrupted smoothly. Your empire is already gone. What remains are individuals. The question before you is simple. Will you remain loyal to a fallen Dominion, or will you claim a future for yourself? The weight of her words sank in, and could feel the eyes of his crew on him. Loyalty to the Dominion was bred into their bones, taught from the moment they could understand speech. But the Dominion no longer existed in the way it had before. The Black Ship had seen to that. And if we refuse, he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Sable's expression remained unreadable. Then you will drift here, waiting for reinforcements that will never come. The galaxy will move forward, and you will either adapt or be forgotten. Clenched his fists. Everything in his warrior's heart told him to reject this, to fight, to resist, to uphold the last shreds of Dominion honor. But honor did not change the reality before him. His ship, his crew, and his people were at the mercy of a force that had long since rewritten the rules of warfare. To refuse was to embrace death for nothing more than empty pride. And if we accept, he asked carefully. Sable tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then you serve the new Eordan. The black ship does not conquer for the sake of power, it establishes balance. Those who understand this are given a place within its structure. You will have purpose, authority, and the means to rebuild and on new terms. But you will not serve the Dominion. That is gone. Felt his throat tighten. Could he truly cast aside everything he had been raised to believe? Could he kneel before the force that had shattered his people? He thought of Admiral, of the wreckage outside, of the countless lives lost in a war they never truly had a chance to win. Then he thought of his crew, standing behind him, waiting for his decision. If I agree to this, what happens to my crew? He asked. They will be given the same choice, Sable replied. But make no mistake, this is not an offer made out of mercy. It is an investment. You are useful to us. If that ceases to be true, so will this arrangement. Exhaled slowly, his mind racing. There was no true choice here, not really. There was only survival or extinction. The black ship had taken everything from them, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was offering them something in return. The bridge was silent as the crew awaited his answer. Finally, he turned to them, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. We survive, he said simply. We adapt. There were no cheers, no shouts of approval, only the slow, reluctant nods of those who understood that the Dominion was truly no more. Turned back to the screen. Very well, he said. We accept your terms. For the first time, Sable's expression shifted, just barely, a flicker of acknowledgement. Then welcome to the new Eordan, Captain. We will be in contact with further instructions. The transmission ended, and for the first time in his life, realized he was no longer a Dominion officer. He was something else entirely. The black ship hung motionless in the void, its dark hull absorbing the distant light of shattered stars. In the war room aboard the Dominion's last surviving dreadnought, Captain stood at the command table, his scaled fingers tapping against the smooth surface as he watched the tactical display before him. The transition from Dominion officer to an agent of the black ship had been swift, efficient, merciless. The days of wearing the crimson insignia of his people were over, and in its place, he now bore the emblem of the Executor's fleet. The weight of it pressed on him, heavier than any battle armor he had ever worn. Across the room, his officers stood in tense silence, their expressions unreadable, but their eyes betrayed the same uncertainty he felt. They were all soldiers of a fallen empire, ghosts of a force that had once commanded the respect and fear of the galaxy. Now, they answered to something far olden, far colden. A sharp chime echoed through the chamber, signaling an incoming transmission. Straightened, exhaling as he prepared himself for what was to come. The flickered to life, revealing the sharp, calculating face of Executor Sable. Her expression was as it always was, devoid of emotion, utterly in control. Behind her, the bridge of the black ship remained dark and silent, its crew working in eerie synchronization, each movement precise and deliberate. Captain, she began, her voice smooth as steel. Your transition has been noted. Your ship has been refitted. Your loyalty, however, remains to be tested. Inclined his head, suppressing the instinctual urge to bristle at the implication. And what is this test, Executor? He asked, keeping his tone neutral. Sable's gaze was unwavering. Your first assignment under the black ship's authority is simple. Prove your usefulness. The screen shifted, displaying a distant planetary system, its primary world shrouded in thick storm clouds. This is Varnis IV, she continued. A Dominion warlord who refuses to accept the new reality has fortified himself here. He has gathered remnants of your former forces, those who would rather perish in defiance than adapt. They are an obstacle. Throat tightened. He knew what was coming next. You want them removed, he stated. Sable nodded. Correct. You know them. You know how they fight, how they think. That makes you the ideal candidate to ensure their swift elimination. We are not interested in engagements. Efficiency is paramount. Exhaled slowly, his claws tightening against the table. These were his own people, warriors who had fought beside him, officers who had once stood in the same war chambers, speaking the same oaths of loyalty. And now, he was being ordered to wipe them out. You ask me to kill my own kind, he said carefully. Sable's expression did not change. I ask you to complete a mission. The past is dead, Captain. You are either a value to us, or you are not. Sentiment will not change that. The words were cold, devoid of any attempt at justification. There was no promise of honor, no illusion of righteousness. There was only the task set before him. Looked to his officers, searching their faces for any sign of resistance. He found none. They already understood the truth. There was no return to what once was. The Dominion was gone, and those who clung to its remains would find nothing but destruction. He turned back to the screen, his decision made. We will move on Varnis IV immediately, he said, his voice steady. Sable inclined her head slightly, the barest hint of acknowledgement. Do not fail, Captain. The black ship does not tolerate inefficiency. The transmission cut out, leaving the war room in heavy silence. Straightened, his throat tight as he turned back to the display. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We end this quickly. His officers nodded, moving into action with the precision expected of them. The transition was complete. There was no room left for hesitation. As the dreadnought turned its course toward Varnis IV, felt the last remnants of the old Dominion slip away. This was their reality now. The black ship had demanded loyalty, and he had given it. What that meant for his soul, he no longer allowed himself to consider.